Hello everybody, my name is John Rasmussen. I'd like to welcome you to this webcast on validation of the AnyBody version of the Dutch shoulder model. You could also say that the title of this presentation could be how close can we get to measured data. And I hope you all have the sound, or most of you at least, so we will proceed with the presentation immediately. I think this presentation may be a little shorter than some of the previous webcasts we've had, and we'll see how long it takes. So first, a few words about the shoulder model. The shoulder model we have constructed is based on the data that has been published by the Dutch Shoulder Group. This is work by Van der Helm and Dirk-Jan Segers in particular, and it's a rather detailed shoulder model. It has 118 muscles on each side, and some of the main features of the shoulder model is that it has wrapping of muscles by contact mechanics, and it uses a contact criterion in the Gleno-humeral joint to, and I'll get back to that in a little moment. I should also say that this shoulder model is a part of the public domain model repository that we have on the AnyBody Research Project's homepage. At anybody.aau.dk, and I will list that homepage a little later in the presentation. On the right-hand side, you can see the different views of the shoulder model, and in the next slides, I will present a slightly more detailed presentation of this model. Now, initially, I would like to say that the shoulder model is part of the entire body model, which is our body model repository. And this is a repository that comprises the entire human body. It has more than 500 muscles, and there's only a few parts missing before we have the complete body. Right now we are missing detailed models of the hands and the feet, and we are also missing the thoracic part of the spine and the cervical part of the spine. However, there are development projects ongoing in order to get these missing body parts ready, and they will be included in the model repository as soon as we have them. Now, first a few words about the shoulder kinematics. Those of you who have looked at shoulders previously, you know that it's a mechanically rather complicated system because it is a mechanism that comprises a closed loop in the shoulder girdle. This is the loop that goes from the clavicle to the scapula, and then back again to the clavicle through the rib cage. And the way we have modeled this in the model that we're using is that we have a sternoclavicular joint that joins the clavicle to the thorax, and then we have, as the connection between the scapula and the thorax, we have a couple of contact points, the ones called TS and AI here, and those contact points are sliding on an ellipsoid surface, which is invisible here, but which is mimicking the shape of the rib cage. Then the clavicle is joined at the other end to the acromion, and both of those two joints of the clavicle are spherical joints. So in principle, the clavicle could rotate about its own length axis, and this is then prevented by the conoid ligament, which you can see in the picture on the left-hand side. And then the gleno-humeral joint is of course between the scapula and the humerus, and this is modeled as a spherical joint. And this is in fact the joint which is going to be the focus of what we will be looking at here. Now, the shoulder model also comprises the arm and actually also the forearm, and you can see the forearm here. It is it's a forearm that's modeled, so to speak, without cheating, in the sense that we have both of the bones in the forearm, and we have joints between those two bones, the radius and the ulna, and the pronation and supination degree of freedom is then realized by letting those two joints, those two bones displace with respect to each other. So we really do have the realistic modeling of the kinematics of the forearm as well. You can see also that there is actually a hand visible in the model, but the hand that we have here is a rigid model, so it doesn't have the ability to move the fingers, and also the intrinsic muscles in the hand and several of the muscles that are causing the wrist are not modeled accurately. Then, as I mentioned before, one of the main features of the shoulder model is that it works with wrapping muscles. And here I have highlighted the thorax wrapping surface, which is an ellipsoid surface. And again, this is made according to the specifications of the Dutch shoulder model. They did a whole lot of work in figuring out exactly what the muscle configuration and the wrapping of the muscle should be. And we have tried to follow those specifications. So you can see here the pectoralis muscle is wrapping over the green ellipsoid surface. And this is only one of many wrapping surfaces in the shoulder model. In fact, almost all of the muscles in the shoulder model are wrapping over at least one surface, and several of the muscles are wrapping over multiple surfaces. Now, by wrapping, I mean that we are solving a contact mechanics problem for each muscle, for each time step of the solution. And this, of course, is somewhat time-consuming from a computational point of view. What this means is that when the posture of the shoulder is changing, the shoulder muscles have the opportunity to slide over the wrapping surfaces in a frictionless contact, and they also have the opportunity to engage and release contact as the movement is proceeding. Now, there is a specific issue concerning the gleno-humeral joint, and this joint is constructed in the way that we have the humeral head, which is drawn schematically on the right-hand side in the red or brownish color, and then we have this in contact with the glenoid, which is depicted by the light blue half-moon shape there. So the glenoid is a fossa in which the humeral head is resting, and in which the two can articulate with each other. However, this glenoid fossa is rather shallow, and in fact probably more shallow than what you can see on this schematic drawing. And this raises the question of how the gleno-humeral joint is actually stabilized. It's a popular belief among biomechanicists that this joint is not inherently stable, because it's not like the knee that you have ligaments that are keeping the integrity of the joint in the absence of muscle forces. So therefore, it's usually believed that the muscle forces in the gleno-humeral joint must be recruited in such a way that the resultant reaction force between the humerus and the glenoid is directed into the shallowness of the glenoid. And this is what we have depicted here by the blue arrow. You can see the blue arrow must always stay between the two orange dashed lines. If this resultant reaction force comes outside those two dashed lines, then the joint will dislocate. And somehow we must formulate into the model that the muscles must be recruited in such a way that the stability of the joint is maintained. And the way we have done that should be visible on the next page. Because this is, of course, a little more complicated than what you saw on the schematic drawing before. You can see here, if you look, what I've done on this picture is that I have made the humerus partially transparent, so you can actually look into the humerus here. And you can see the glenoid fossa inside the joint, and you can see that on the edge of this glenoid fossa, we have these blue lines coming out, and the blue lines each of the blue lines are perpendicular to the surface of the glenoid at the point where it's attaching. And this means these blue lines are actually a type of contact elements which are only capable of transferring compression. And they do this in a frictionless way, so that the contact between the humeral head and the glenoid is handled by these contact elements. So the contact can actually only take place on the surface of the glenoid in this model. And on that surface of the glenoid, the possible contact forces are perpendicular to the direction of the surface. And what happens then when the analysis is progressing is that these contact elements are recruited by the mathematical algorithms in such a way that there's a linear combination of these contact forces that will form the resultant contact force. And the resultant contact force is the, maybe if I can highlight my mouse here, just a second. So the resultant contact force is the guy that is coming out here. So the big blue one that you see coming out at this place. And that is the resultant force, or the sum of the vectors that you see in here in the joint. And because of the directions of these contact elements on the glenoid surface, their linear combinations can only form resultant forces which are pointing into the glenoid. And this is connected with the fact that these contact elements can only push and not pull. So if you look into the mathematics of that, you will find out that it's only possible to generate resultant forces that are inside the glenoid. And so by modeling the contact mechanics in this way, we make sure that in order to maintain equilibrium, the muscle forces must be recruited in such a way that the shoulder joint is always stable. Now, the actual reason why we have done the study that I'm reporting here today is that recently the group of Bergmann from Berlin published some very, very interesting data in the Journal of Biomechanics. And these are the first of what hopefully will be a lot of data coming out of in vivo measurements of Gleno-humeral forces that are measured by an instrumented joint prosthesis that has been implanted into a number of patients. And so, as I said, these are the first and I guess somewhat preliminary results of this study. And from the point of view of validation of musculoskeletal models, this is extremely interesting because now we actually have forces that have been measured directly and which we can compare directly to the forces that we are computing in a musculoskeletal model. So this is a very nice opportunity to do validation of the models and see how close we are to reality. So what is actually the behavior of our model compared to what can be observed in a real patient? And I will now show the model. The model looks like what you can see on this picture. This is as accurate a model of the experiment that Bergmann did as we have been able to do. As you can see, this is a model that is doing abduction, and it is doing abduction against a hand weight or a dumbbell, which is being lifted up against gravity. And this is done slowly in a quasi-static manner. And we are first abducting the arm with this load, which is 2 kilograms. And then after that, we are abducting the arm once again without the load. And then we are collecting the results. And we are measuring these, the reaction forces in the coordinate system of the humerus. The AnyBody modeling system that we're using for this has the ability to define reaction forces in any reference frame that you might want to use. So we have simply defined a reference frame in the humerus in which we are measuring the reaction forces in a coordinate system that should be exactly like the one that Bergmann is using in his experiment. So I will do a short demo of how the model works, and if you bear with me, I'll just close down the presentation and open up the AnyBody modeling system. So what you see here is the model, the AnyBody model that we're using. And what I'm going to do now is I will simply start the analysis, and what happens after I've done that is that the computation will begin. And because of all the wrapping muscles, this doesn't go so fast. It's going to go through 20 steps in which it will slowly abduct the arm up and then back again to vertical where it began. And you will see the muscles are bulging in response to the forces that are necessary to lift the dumbbell. So already now perhaps you can start seeing some of the muscle forces that are occurring in the region around the gleno-humeral joint, in particular the lateral parts of the deltoid muscle you can see are becoming active here. And the dumbbell is being lifted up to, I believe, 60 degrees, as it was done in the experiment. And then when it reaches the top point, it's going to come back again slowly, the same way it went up, and come back to the original vertical position. So it will take just a few seconds before this is done. It's descending again. Notice how the pectoralis muscles are sliding on the ellipsoid surface. Here we are. Now the analysis is done. If I go to my view of results here, I can bring out the reaction forces that that have been computed in the humerus in the same coordinate system that Bergmann used. And of course, this was with the dumbbell weight, and then we could remove the dumbbell and run the model once again without the dumbbell. And this is what we have done in the experiment. In the numerical results that we are presenting. I should say here that we are using two different recruitment criteria that we can switch between, and we have tried both of these. And the reason why we're trying different recruitment criteria is that in inverse dynamics, as we're doing here, one of the arguments between people is which recruitment criterion is the right one. And we have tried two recruitment criteria that represent the extreme points of sensible criteria, if you will. Now, the first criterion we tried is a min-max criterion, in which we are minimizing the maximum muscle force in the system, where the muscle force is normalized by the strength of the muscle. So the NI quotient that you can see here is the NI denominator is proportional to the cross-sectional area of each muscle. So when we are minimizing the maximum load on any muscle in the system, then this is from a physiological point of view the same as minimizing fatigue, because we are postponing the time when the first muscle will fatigue as far as possible. The other minimization criterion that we have used for the muscle recruitment is the squared sum of muscle stresses. It's the one that you see at the bottom, and you can see here we have taken the normalized muscle forces, so normalizing the muscle forces by NI, which is actually the PCSA, is the same as getting the muscle stress, and then we're taking the squared sum of those and we're minimizing this. This is also a very popular criterion. They represent two extreme ends, because if you take the lower criterion, the squared sum of muscle stresses criterion, and you let the exponent, which is 2 here, if you let that increase to 3 and 4 and 5 and so on, and just keep on increasing it until infinity, then you can show mathematically that the lower criterion will converge to the upper criterion. So these are really two ends of extreme criteria. You can also show that typically the joint reactions that you will get from the upper criterion are the maximum ones that you can get from all the criteria that you can think of, and the joint reaction forces you will get from the lower criterion are the minimum joint reaction forces that you can get. So it's going to be interesting to see how the results of these two criteria will be distributed compared to the data that Bergmann has presented. And this is what you see on this slide. Now, on the left-hand side, you see the results from the paper of Bergmann's group on the left-hand side, And then you see the simulated results from our model on the right-hand side. And the first bubble on the curves is the abduction with a 2-kilogram dumbbell, and the second and smaller bubble represents the abduction with no load on the hands. And the first thing we notice is that the shapes of the curves are very satisfactory compared to Bergmann's data. The coloring of the curves here are the same as in the two different graphs, and you can see that the shapes of the curves are very similar. Of course, in the experimental results, there's a little bit more noise than we have in the idealized computational results, but you can see that there's a very similar shape of the graphs in the two cases. The only real difference between them is that you can see the Fz component of the force, the red curve here, has a small dip near the top point, which does not seem to be present in the experimental data. But otherwise, I think the results here are quite satisfactory in the sense that it looks like the mechanics is functioning pretty much the same in the two cases. Notice the maximum sizes of the loads. If we take the black curve here, that is the resultant reaction force. And in Bergmann's case, this is measured to 880 Newton. And in the model, this is measured to 774 Newton, or simulated to 774 Newton. Now, this is with the quadratic criterion, the sum of squared muscle stresses. And as I said, that is the smallest, that is the criterion that will give you the smallest reaction forces out of all the different criteria that you might reasonably choose. If we do the same thing with the min-max criterion, then we get more reaction force just as we anticipated, then we get 1118 Newton. So if we sum up those results, we can see the following. So you can see that the force profiles indicate that the basic mechanics of the model and the real shoulder seem to be quite similar to each other. In terms of accuracy, then when we use the quadratic criterion, we get reaction forces that are 12% below what Bergmann is getting. And if we use the minimum fatigue criterion, we get 27% above what Bergmann is measuring. And you may say that, well, this is quite far away from the reality, but I actually don't think it is when you consider the possible inaccuracies of the model. You should think in this, consider in this case that we don't actually have any precise anthropometrical data for the test person in question. Those are not reported in the paper, so it hasn't been possible to adjust our model completely. And these are things like segment lengths and detailed segment masses, which of course may vary considerably between individuals, and they may not be the same in our model as they were in the test person. Also, the individual distribution of muscle strengths may be different in the model and in the test person. Also, there is some uncertainties on the posture. The rotation of the humerus influences the distribution of forces between the different rotator cuff muscles a lot, and those have not been recorded in these preliminary data that have been reported so far. So it was difficult in our model to figure out exactly what the humerus rotation should be in the model. And what we have done here is we have simply used zero humerus rotation. Also, the scapular thoracic posture is not recorded in the experiment. When more detailed data from the Bergmann group is coming out, it's going to be very exciting to see how that varies between different individuals, and it's going to be interesting to try to impose those individual differences on the scalable model that we have, and then see whether we will get the same variations of reaction forces as have been measured in reality. Some further information about the stuff we're doing here. There is really three different resources that you can go to. The first one is that there is a Yahoo group You can see the link here. It's called tech.groups.yahoo.com. And then in there you can find a group called AnyScript. And that is a group in which people who are using this body modeling technology are discussing ways of making models and also trying to solve problems together on how to model specific tasks. Then, of course, the AnyBody research project at Aalborg University has its own homepage, which is called anybody.aau.dk. And in there you can find, in particular, a list of references, and many of those references can be downloaded directly. And you can read much more about the technology in there. Also, please notice that the body model repository, which I mentioned before, and which is in the public domain, is available for download from this homepage. Then the software that we're using here and the documentation of the software, and also a newsletter and pre-recorded webcasts are available at the homepage of AnyBody Technology, which is also the sponsor of this web event. And so if you go there, you're able to download the software and get a trial license and try out your own models if you like. So you can go to that homepage, you can download the software, get the trial license, you can go to the homepage of the research project, download the models, and then you can start playing around with your own shoulder model examples, if you will. So now we'll take a brief moment